are my slides visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Apurva. At the outset, I'd like to thank NVRS for giving me this opportunity to talk on the practical aspects of intraocular tuberculosis. So these are my disclosures. As it is not possible to talk detail in 15 minutes about the tuberculosis, but mainly targeting our resident, I like to highlight some of the important facts. And some of the related Viva questions I have also addressed it along with my slides. So try to go through that also. So when I put the term intraocular tuberculosis, what scenario first come in our mind is we imagine a patient with a beautiful this granulomatous KPs and iris nodules and a large tuberculoma smiling at us and corresponding finding in optical coherence tomography and a positive tuberculin test and a classical upper lobe infiltration into the chest radiograph. But the major questions are, do we always get all this classical finding in each and every cases of ocular tuberculosis? And second one is, do we always get active pulmonary tuberculosis in every cases of ocular tuberculosis or not? So if we go through the literature and we quote the collaborative ocular tuberculosis study, it has told that the chances of getting active lung TB in case of ocular tuberculosis is less than 10%. So we shouldn't always go on finding the active tuberculosis, and if we don't find active pulmonary TB, it is not wise to say it's not ocular tuberculosis. Similarly, ocular tuberculosis is more prevalent in the endemic region like ours, and there is always a mismatch between the phenotypes and systemic picture. That means sometimes patient may have active pulmonary tuberculosis, but there is no ocular manifestations. On the other way, patient may have the florid pictures like this, but there will be no active lung tuberculosis. So this is a little bit busy slides. Simply, we have three types of tuberculosis in eye, that is confirmed eye TB, probable TB, and possible TB. The most of the cases we get in our clinical practice belongs to the possible intraocular tuberculosis. The two basic mechanisms of intraocular tuberculosis is one is active mycobacterial infection, that is replication of bacteria. They usually present as a choroidal granuloma. Similarly, second one is the delayed hypersensitivity reaction to the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which usually in that condition there is no replication of bacteria, or they may be present just like a serpiginous like choroiditis. Now, another important thing, how does the TB present in the eye? Basically, TB present in two forms in the eye. One is known phenotype. That means when we see the clinical picture, the first differential diagnosis comes in our mind is tuberculosis. And second one is the atypical presentation. That means patient may present with the not the classical bookish picture of the ocular tuberculosis, but if we do the TB test, their TB test become positive and it still be the tuberculosis. So let's see what are these things. So just summarize this busy slide. Intraocular tuberculosis may present from anterior uveitis to intermediate uveitis, including posterior pan and even tubercular retinal vasculitis. The first known phenotype is the anterior uveitis. So tuberculosis usually present as a granulomatous anterior uveitis with broad-based posterior synechiae. If we see a broad-based posterior synechiae, it may be sometime a part of tuberculosis in contrast to the filiform posterior synechiae in non-granulomatous. Second one known phenotype is the intermediate uveitis. This is usually not a classical sign of ocular tuberculosis, but if we see a large snowball with no typical snow banking, it may be a part of the intermediate uveitis or tuberculosis. Third known phenotype is the tubercular choroiditis, which may present in the different form, but out of the four forms, the two is very important. That is the tuberculous serpiginous like choroiditis and a tuberculoma, whereas the multifocal choroiditis usually present in case of miliary tuberculosis. So choroidal tuberculoma, sometimes you may get questions in Viva, how do you differentiate between choroidal and sarcoid granuloma or like that? So the classical picture of choroidal tuberculoma is they are usually solitary, larger in size, they are intense yellow color, lobulated, very vascular location, and if we do the OCT, it is so the full thickness, this granuloma is throughout the full thickness of the choroid and usually vascularized, and they usually don't involve the optic disc. And there are some few articles that they have mentioned that tubercular granuloma is usually VEGF driven, and they have reported that without giving any anti-tubercular drug, just by injection of anti-VEGF, there is a drastic reduction in the tubercular granuloma. But still, multi-centric study is needed to prove that. Another known phenotype is the serpiginous-like choroiditis. This is the most characteristic phenotype in case of intraocular tuberculosis, and we have to differentiate it from the immune-mediated serpiginous choroiditis. The basic few differences are serpiginous-like choroiditis which is in tuberculosis usually are unilateral. They are associated with vitritis. They are usually in posterior pole, but they don't usually involve the disc. And pigment clumping occurs during the healing process in the center of the healed lesion. Another known phenotype is the retinal vasculitis. The tubercular retinal vasculitis is classically occlusive in nature and usually periphleboitis. So if you see a occlusive retinal vasculitis, there are only two important differential diagnoses. One is tuberculosis, another is the Behçet's disease. Other usually produces the non-occlusive vasculitis. Now, after that, let's come to the atypical phenotype. How to suspect? Let's see one case. There is a 57-year female will present with a painless progressive diminution of vision in the right eye of 1 month, and she had history of left eye trauma with stone in 3 years back. So if I give this scenario without taking further any history, I think everybody's in mind there is one common differential diagnosis, that is the sympathetic ophthalmia. But let's see whether it is really a sympathetic ophthalmia or not. So in this fundus picture, there is no obvious finding. We can still see the few fluid around the disc, but it is not that much appreciable. We can also see in the OCT. So thinking the same, patient was started in the systemic steroid and the azathioprine. So what happens? After 3 months, the condition deteriorated. We can see visual acuity has reduced to 624 from 618 with occasional cells and vitritis, and there is increased number of gray-yellow subretinal lesion. So this is the fundus fluorescent angiogram at first visit and after 3 months. So the interesting thing is, if you suspect some immunological diseases and you started an steroid and immunomodulator, after 3 months of treatment, if it is not responding, you should be alert that there may be something going wrong. So you have to revise the diagnosis. So what we did, we advised for further investigation of BON2 comes positive, quantiferin gold also positive, and chest CT showed multiple calcified lesion in both upper lungs of the lip, upper lungs. So the patient was counseled for the enucleation of the exciting eye. So surprisingly, it comes with the AFP positive. Then the patient was started on anti-tubercular therapy and everything gradually started to become settled. So when to suspect the TB? So if we see the typical phenotype that I have described, it is very easy. But if you see a typical phenotype in that case I saw, you should always rule out all possible infections and differential. And if a disease is recurrent, despite treatment with steroid and immunomodulator, especially in endemic countries like Nepal and India, TB must be ruled out. And sometimes you have to repeat the TB test positive. In first visit, it may be negative. After 2 or 3 months, it may come to positive. So what are the challenges in IOTB? So basically, there are 2 challenges. One is challenges in diagnosis, because we don't have the confirmative way to diagnose the intraocular tuberculosis. Whatever evidences we have, just like PPD, chest radiograph, all of these are the indirect evidence. And they determine only the exposure to TB, but they don't tell whether it is active TB or not. And similarly, there are challenges in treatment, whether to start steroid or not to start steroid. There is issue of paradoxical worsening after starting ATT, and rarely there may be the drug resistance. To address all this problem, so a global initiative, which is called Collaborative Ocular Tuberculosis Study, was done with the 40 uveitis experts from the 30 different countries. So what they found out, their observation was, there is more than 90% of the cases there is of intraocular tuberculosis, there is no evidence of systemic tuberculosis. Similarly, posterior uveitis, especially serpiginous-like choroiditis, is the most characteristic phenotype in tuberculosis. Though we know that tuberculosis is a chronic granulomatous disease, but surprisingly, in almost 50% of the cases, they have the acute symptoms. Similarly, chest X-ray has better, chest CT has better than the X-ray in detecting the old exposure. And BON2 and sometimes there may be confusion which test to send immunological, but they have proved that both tests are equally okay. If you don't have TB gold, quantiferin or PCR, let's get not disheartened. And retinal vasculitis is occlusive in 60% of the cases. And the anterior intermediate uveitis, there is treatment outcome variable. And the one good news is that with the serpiginous like choroiditis, the treatment success rate is almost above 85%. There is only 12% failure rate. So addressing we all know that there is no common consensus regarding the treatment of ocular tuberculosis. So the COTS 2, which was initiated in 2018, they formulated for the guideline for tuberculosis treatment, which are based on the type of uveitis, whether the patient is from endemic or non-endemic area, and then depending upon the immunological test and the radiological test. So they found that the serpiginous like choroiditis is the most sensitive phenotype. I'll just go to the summary of this study. So we can see these 3 slides. Okay, just get focused into the scenario 3 where I have marked the tick 1. So this indicates that if the patient has serpiginous like choroiditis and the patient has only one test positive, whether PPT or IGRA or CT or CXR, one evidence, then these cases has a strong consensus to start the anti-tubercular therapy. Similarly, if the patient is from endemic area and the patient has only tuberculin test positive and nothing is negative, still we have the moderate consensus to start the anti-tubercular therapy. And in case of anterior uveitis, so if the patient come with the anterior uveitis and even all the 3 tests are positive, we don't start ATT. There is a very low consensus to start the anti-tubercular therapy. But if it is a recurrent cases and patient is from endemic or non-endemic area and all 3 tests are positive, so this is the strong consensus to start the ATT. And in case of intermediate uveitis, even if all 3 tests are positive, will not start the anti-tubercular therapy at the first line. Whereas in case of pan uveitis, whether the patient is from endemic and non-endemic area, if all the 3 tests are positive, only then we start the ATT. And similarly in retinal vasculitis, if the patient is from endemic area, if all tests are positive, then only we do the start the anti-TB therapy. But if it is an inactive vasculitis and even all the 3 tests positive and even patient is from endemic area, there is very low or no consensus to start the anti-tubercular therapy. And after that, so what sometimes the question may come, when we should start the corticosteroid? So if we see this COT consensus, they have told that we can start the ATT along with the steroid along with the ATT or after the ATT to prevent the paradoxical worsening. And we can even sometimes start with the immunomodulator if steroid is contraindicated. But there is no consensus to start the intravitreal injection of the steroid, especially Ozurdex or methotrexate. So the take-home message is diagnosis and management of IOTB poses a significant challenge and different views according to the courts. Always think of differential before labeling as tuberculosis, especially infective versus non-infective. And whenever you have possible, always try to use multimodal imaging. It will definitely give you a new site to diagnosis. And serpiginous like choroiditis and tuberculoma are the most important characteristic phenotype. And always keep in mind about the paradoxical worsening to add steroid to start the anti-tubercular therapy. So these are the major resources. If you have interested and if you have time, you can go through these resources. One is published in 2007, one is 2014 and 2020, and this one is COTS 1. So finally, residency is definitely a golden period. Try to make it memorable so that you will be nostalgic throughout your life. So this is our residency picture during BPK ILCS. Thank you for your attention. So if any question, I would like to take it. Over to you, Apurva.